I move, in accordance with Standing Order 27, this House orders the Premier to table by the 14th of September 2021 all qualitative and quantitative results of community sentiment polling surrounding the pandemic undertaken by Ipsos Public Affairs on behalf of the government. When Queenslanders are being asked to do so much, they deserve to be trusted with the truth. The government needs to be honest and accountable with Queenslanders. The Premier says the government decisions on COVID are guided by the health advice. So why is $528,000 of taxpayer-funded sentiment polling even needed? Despite the Premier claiming decisions were only made on the health advice, she is keeping Queenslanders in the dark and refusing to release either the health advice or the very expensive polling. If key COVID decisions are not being made on the polling, there is no reason not to release it. The right to information request RTI sought by the Australian newspaper was initially blocked by the government, but eventually a scaled-back document was released titled COVID-19 Key Insights Project, as well as additional waves and Livingstone Shire research. The polling asked Queenslanders their views about the importance of the removal of special restrictions, what activity sectors should be prioritised for lifting restrictions, the lifting of restrictions on a region-by-region or sector-by-sector versus all of Queensland basis, and curiously, and there are many aspects to the questions about restrictions, but curiously, it also asked, in a once-off targeted sentiment research study in the Livingstone Shire, questions which is a marginal seat, and that has never been properly explained why the government used more than $40,000 of that $500,000 to target that particular area where there was a marginal government seat. The contract also was to ask respondents how they would rate the performance of following individuals and groups in responding to coronavirus and its associated effects. And there were many other subparts to that. I think the Premier has been far too cute about this. When we raised in estimates last year about whether this polling had been shared with the Labor campaign, she refused to answer that question. When we've asked her to release the polling, she's refused to do that. Mind you, the Premier's got form. When the question was asked by a colleague of mine this morning in regard to Wellcamp quarantine facility about how much that is costing, she wouldn't answer it because she's claimed commercial and confidence, even though the Auditor-General's reports would indicate the government should have a bias to releasing information, and the controls around aspects of confidence I think, made up by the Premier as a convenient way of not being held accountable, because there was no commercial competition in that particular contract. Let the people have the information. COVID-19 is a serious disease and has turned our world upside down, and it is only reasonable that the trust that the Queensland Government is asking honest Queenslanders to place in them is repaid by trusting Queenslanders with the information that those decisions are based upon. But it's interesting. In December 2019, Labor changed the rules to let them spend taxpayers' money on political propaganda up to 6 months before an election, amounting to $5.2 million just weeks before the election. And then we had this $500,000 spent on polling, including a targeted poll into the marginal into an area where there was a marginal seat held by Labor in Livingstone. It's time for accountability, it's time for transparency, but it's time that Queenslanders were treated with respect. To vote against this motion is to vote against trusting Queenslanders, and it would be to vote against respecting their right to know how their government makes decisions, how their government spends money on their behalf. It's time that Queenslanders weren't blocked from the truth. They've been blocked from the borders. They've been allowed to see special exemptions for special groups. But all Queenslanders deserve to have the respect that this information will be released. Yeah.